What's happening, fam? John here from AF Anime, back again with another One Piece review, this time of chapter 1043, which is titled Let's Face Death Together. It is a great title for an amazing chapter, as this chapter's story takes a real shine, while we still get a good deal of action and hype to go along with it. Now, I know I'm a couple days behind, you'll have to forgive me for that. I've been a bit under the weather, but I'm feeling better now, and seeing as how we're on a break week and this chapter drops some bombs, I figured there's still a good amount to talk about in the weeks leading up to the next chapter. So, with that out of the way, if you guys are familiar with the channel, you'd know that my reviews consist of a quick recap as well as my own personal thoughts and discussion on the chapter. But it doesn't have to be one-sided. If you guys have any thoughts on the chapter, go ahead and let me know in the comments section down below, as I am always open to talk all things One Piece. So, as per usual with my videos, the recap comes first, but for those of you who still have the chapter fresh in your mind, you can go ahead and skip to this point to get straight on to the discussion. However, for those of you who are down for a recap, we're about to get into that. But first, I want to talk about the cover page very briefly, as there really isn't a whole lot going on here. But as you can see, we see Oven and Brule taking the Vinsmoke brothers to Whole Cake Island, the scene of the egregious crime where the tea party was crashed. Now, as I've said, there isn't a whole lot to dive into here, so I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but I do have a couple questions. First of which is, how did they get there? It looks like there's a mirror that they may have just come out of, but it's my understanding that they destroyed all of the mirrors so that way Luffy could emerge on Cacao Island and Cacao Island only. So I'm not sure if that's a plot hole, but my next question about the cover page is why the Vinsmoke brothers need to be taken to Whole Cake Island specifically. My best guess as to why would be that Big Mom's treasure room or her storeroom may be underneath Whole Cake Island. Either way, I think we'll just have to wait a couple weeks to figure out exactly what this page means in particular, as I gotta imagine with the contents of the end of this chapter, Oda's gonna use this break to come up with an awesome color cover page or some interesting cover page that might sideline the cover story. Either way, we're gonna go ahead and move along with the chapter recap. Chapter 1043 starts off where the last one left off, with Kaido bringing down his Thunder Bagua to great effect on Luffy, who has just been interfered with when it comes to the CP0 member. And as Kaido takes a moment to drink in the event that just occurred, we hear from Momonosuke that Luffy's voice is no longer hearable. And as Luffy reverts back to his base form, we see a rather somber looking CP0 member who is pretty much resigned to his fate. As he mentioned in the previous chapter, interfering with Kaido's battle would almost certainly mean death, and it seems that he was correct, as we see Kaido wind up another Thunder Bagua to crack down on the cranium of the CP0 member who just ruined his fight. Now, we all know that death is a fleeting concept when it comes to One Piece, so I can't say whether or not this guy is dead, but it is interesting and worth noting that we don't actually see this hit connect with the CP0 member. I mean, we do see that he hits something as the ceiling begins to collapse after that second hit. And while this is occurring, we get a couple panels of this CP0 member who I actually forgot has been sitting on the sidelines this entire time. Now, obviously I have some thoughts on CP0 and their remaining role when it comes to the end of Wano, but I'll save that for the discussion. But for now, we'll continue with the recap, and we can see that Kawamatsu is feeling the reverberations and the heat from the fire that surrounds them. And even though he's fairly present in this part of the chapter, he doesn't really accomplish a whole lot or set any goals or anything to do. It just kind of seems like he's there for exposition. And as he's telling people to get out of the flames, we see a blast breath attack shooting through the roof, and Kaido descends down in his dragon form. We then get this amazing panel showing Kaido announcing Luffy's death and demanding the surrender of Momonosuke. And after we see a bit of the Beast Pirates celebrating Kaido's victory, we actually get an interesting panel here from Law, where he insists that Luffy's voice is no longer hearable as well. And this is interesting because, as far as I know, Law doesn't have the voice of all things, or at least he hasn't been confirmed to have the voice of all things. And this is kind of interesting because it makes me wonder whether or not the members of the D clan might all have the voice of all things as a latent ability that they could potentially awaken at some point. Not too different from the Three Eye clan and their potential to awaken their third eye abilities. Another topic for another video, I suppose, but for now we get some reactions from some of the other rebellion members, namely Kid, Law, Nami, Chopper, and Otama. And after being called a liar by Nami, Kaido gives her credit and then tries to obliterate her with a blast breath. Marco then comes in with the clutch save, using some kind of spinning shield technique with his hybrid form, before he gives Nami some kind of small pep talk about not giving up. And it would seem that Kaido just kind of ignores Nami and Marco for the time being, as he just hovers over Onigashima and doubles down on his charismatic bad guy talk. After that, we get an entire page showing us how the Beast Pirates are now emboldened by Kaido's success, as well as some players who have to hold them off in the time being, such as Kid, Law, and apparently Nekomamushi and Carrot. We then go to Yamato and Momonosuke, who's contemplating surrender after being disheartened from Luffy's loss. And during this conversation, we get a good feel of both characters as we see from Yamato that she truly is down for Wano and down for ensuring the good fate of Wano, while Momonosuke is also showing his responsible side by acknowledging that if Luffy couldn't be Kaido, then he certainly couldn't himself, and that surrender is probably the best option considering how many lives it could possibly save. And it's here that we get the namesake of the chapter when Yamato tells Momonosuke that if he's just going to let the past 20 years and the efforts of Wano go to waste, then they should just go ahead and face death together. And we then get a couple panels showing that Kaido is still wreaking havoc with his blast breath and some of the samurai are still fighting. And it's then that Zunisha actually interrupts Momonosuke and Yamato's conversation. And the last page of this chapter is actually dedicated to the interruption as we hear Zunisha tell Momonosuke that he can hear the drum beats of liberation. And after 800 years, Joy Boy has finally returned. And the chapter ends on a panel that has set the One Piece community ablaze. We see that Luffy is smiling or grinning, and then we have some odd substance that seems to be covering half of his face. So that's the end of the chapter, and that'll do it for my recap. Now we have a lot to discuss, but first I'll rate this chapter, again, another 10 out of 10 from Oda for these past 3 weeks. And while the past couple chapters may have been action heavy or story heavy, this one is perfectly blended when it comes to action, story, and hype. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm handing out perfect ratings like candy, but Oda has really been firing at all cylinders for these past 3 or 4 chapters. And given the fact that we have a break upcoming this week, I think it's well earned. And if they want to move forward with this story and keep it very cohesive as it has been for the past few chapters, I'd say that a little break time is in order, as that last panel was such a banger and such a hype beast that Oda really needs to approach these next couple chapters very carefully. So in all, this chapter was just straight fire, but I'll go ahead and get into the discussion part of the video because we have a lot to talk about here. So I guess in regards to the context of this chapter, we can do these discussion points in order. And the first thing I want to talk about is CP0. Now, as far as we know, there are 3 CP0 members present on Wano during this chaotic event, and 2 of them are seemingly out of commission for the foreseeable future. Those 2 being the one that Izo took down within the past few chapters, as well as the one who just interfered with Kaido and Luffy's fight, and in this chapter presumably was killed. And with those 2 out of the way, that leaves the one CP0 member who still has relatively fresh legs, meaning that they still have the ability to affect the events of Wano to some capacity before all is said and done. And I pretty much have 3 lines of thought when it comes to all this. One being that they could just be there to scoop up the remains or to save the lives of the 2 CP0 members who did get their hands dirty. 2, they could be there for a strictly observational capacity at this point, to just report to the world government of what's going on, but I'd have to imagine the other guy in his headset would have reported that Luffy had been killed or knocked out or what have you. And the last possibility for this character's role throughout the end of Wano would be to continue antagonizing the Straw Hat Pirates. Now, as far as we know, they haven't officially given up on capturing Robin, but personally, I don't really see Oda going down that route and repeating in this lobby to the point where Robin needs to be saved by the Straw Hats again. I mean, maybe she could need to be protected to the point to where the Straw Hats or the remaining Straw Hats who aren't knocked out or completely tired stand up for her or, work together to put down the CP0 member. Well, if I had to guess which of these 3 situations are probably the case, I'd probably lean more towards the observational one. Because I gotta imagine the situation with the world government has to escalate right after Wano ends, and for that to happen, there has to be some member of the world government there to report what goes on, especially if the concept of Luffy being Joy Boy gets out there and reaches the world government. And that's all I got on CP0, besides my personal desire to see the face reveal for these characters, just on the premise that they may be someone we've seen before. But I digress. The next point I want to talk about is the big man himself, Kaido. As I feel in the past handful of chapters that we've had, his character has become somewhat more likable, not because of the drunken states or the comedy that he was used for, but just the fact that he's kind of earnest in a real challenge or a real competition. It kind of, made him a little more respectable. But in this chapter, he definitely backslid a little bit. I mean, this could just be my own personal opinion, but I kind of got the feeling that after seeing that flashback with Odin, he would have done anything to avoid being in that situation, as it seemed like it was kind of a mark on his pride to have someone interfere in his fight on his behalf. But to my surprise, he kind of just did the exact same thing he did with Odin. Someone helped him out against his will and he just accepted it and took advantage of the situation. But at the same time, Oda did something a little bit more masterful with his writing in Kaido's situation. He literally went out of his way to make Kaido sound like the most anti-Joy Boy character who could possibly exist. Now, if you've been reading One Piece for a while, I'm sure you'd know that the concept of freedom is very important when it comes to the character Joy Boy or the sun god Nika, but it's also incredibly important to the aspects of being a pirate within the One Piece realm. Now, this is a very hypocritical aspect of being a pirate, but it's possible that Oda is having Kaido go on this tirade and this destruction path for the sake of making him the exact opposite of Joy Boy, which not only sets him up for being the first enemy of the newly awakened Joy Boy, but it might even set him up to kind of be the bad guy when it comes to characters like Big Mom and King when they're presented with a character like Joy Boy. So to be clear, I don't really have any complaints about how Oda used Kaido in this chapter. I actually think it was quite masterful, but it will be incredibly interesting to see how he comes about this mindset, and whether or not it has to do with his past, or if him as an ogre is somehow related to Wano or the history of Wano. I mean, if Yamato is referred to as the Ogre Princess, then naturally he would have to be the Ogre King. The next point I want to talk about is going to be Momonosuke and the growth that he's had, specifically from what we can see in this chapter. Now, I know that a lot of people consider Momonosuke to be a bit cowardly, or at least he has been in the past, but from the dialogue I read in this chapter, it doesn't quite feel that way. It kind of seems like he actually genuinely did want to protect the people of Wano, and that was his reason for considering a surrender. Now, he obviously knows whether or not he can beat Kaido, but the concept of not giving up that Yamato put on his plate, that could really read off to be an amazing scene should he and Yamato eventually confront Kaido. I mean, with Kaido being so worn down, it's entirely possible that Momonosuke and Yamato could show up and just put up a good fight against him. And if that is the case, we could see an amazing scene where Joy Boy Luffy returns to fight Kaido, and we have a badly beaten Yamato and Momonosuke. Happy to see him there to relieve them. And I guess I should address Zunisha. I can't really see him doing a whole lot more than just giving Momonosuke some exposition about the past, but for the most part, I think he's just going to stay around to keep the Navy at bay so that the events on Wano can unfold without outside influence. And my last point of discussion, but certainly not least, is this panel right here, which has set the One Piece community ablaze. Now, when I first saw this panel, there were 100 questions running through my head. Like, what the hell is this we're looking at on his head? What is this here that's on his shoulder? Is that just a shinier version of his clothing? Have they been modified due to his devil fruit? Is his devil fruit even the Gomu Gomu no Mi? Is it actually something else entirely? These are a lot of questions that ran through my head, but it seems that the One Piece community, especially here on YouTube, has done a decent job of postulating some theories and some ideas as to what we might just be looking at. So I'll probably do a video of my own within the next couple weeks before the next chapter is released, but if you guys were interested in what YouTubers are out there who've already covered this topic ad nauseum, one of which is going to be BDA Law. He had a great video out recently about a theory behind this new ability and behind the potential for the Gomu Gomu no Mi to actually be a resin-based fruit. And it's an out there theory, but he offers up some evidence that's actually pretty good, and there's other YouTubers as well who've done amazing jobs talking about this one panel right here. In any case, guys, that's going to do it for my recap, review, and discussion of chapter 1043 of One Piece. I cannot wait for the next chapter to get out. If you guys want to see more content like this, please like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. Also, comment down below if you have any thoughts, ideas, or even theories about this final panel or this chapter as a whole. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. My name is John. I'm from AFA, and I'll see you guys in the next video.